I fought alongside humans that day and saw legends come to life. Had served in the Galactic Defense Coalition for 12 cycles, fighting alongside dozens of species across the Outer Rim territories. The tall, crystalline had seen berserkers charge through plasma fire without flinching, witnessed psionics bend reality itself, and fought beside mechanical synthesis units that never tired or retreated. Yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the day humanity joined the war against the Devourers. The briefing had been straightforward enough. A new species calling themselves humans had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and discovered the galactic community just as the Devourer crisis reached its peak. These bipedal mammals from a world they called Earth had volunteered their military forces to help defend against the ancient enemy that had been consuming entire star systems for the past 3 years. Studied the holographic displays showing human physiology and capabilities. They seemed unremarkable, no natural armor like his own crystal-laced skin, no enhanced strength like no energy manipulation abilities like half a dozen other species. Their technology appeared adequate but not exceptional. Standard kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, conventional starship designs. The tactical assessment labeled them as moderate support personnel, suitable for rearguard actions and supply line protection. This commanding officer, Warsinger X, had been equally unimpressed during the joint planning session. "These humans," the elderly had growled, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively at the tactical displays. "They have no fangs, no claws, no natural weapons. Their bones break easily, their skin tears, they require constant sustenance. How did such a fragile species even survive to achieve?" Captain Sarah of the human forces had listened to these assessments with remarkable composure. The small woman, barely reaching his chest, had nodded politely before speaking in that strangely melodic language humans used. The universal translator rendered her words clearly. "We appreciate your tactical analysis. We'll do our best to stay out of your way and provide support where needed." The first engagement came 3 days later. Devourer scouts had been detected approaching the mining colony of Prime, and the combined fleet moved to intercept. Served as a communications specialist aboard the heavy cruiser Stellar Harmony, coordinating between the various species' forces. The battle formation was standard, dreadnoughts at the center providing massive firepower, agile fighters providing escort, and support vessels maintaining defensive screens. The human contingent had been assigned to the outer perimeter, their small fleet of what they called destroyers, tasked with preventing any Devourer forces from flanking the main engagement. It seemed appropriate. Their vessels were smaller than most, their weapons appeared conventional, and their crews were completely untested against Devourer combat tactics. When the enemy finally emerged from hyperspace, its crystalline form resonated with harmonics of dread. 3 Devourer harvesters materialized along the system's edge, each one a kilometers-long nightmare of organic and mechanical components. Worse, they had brought escorts, dozens of fighters that moved like living creatures through space, their biomechanical forms adapted specifically for combat. The coalition forces engaged immediately. Heavy plasma cannons lit up space with destructive energy while fighters danced through defensive fire. The battle unfolded according to established patterns, gradual attrition of enemy forces while protecting the larger vessels that provided the fleet's primary firepower. Then something went wrong. A group of Devourer fighters broke through the left flank, racing toward the rear of the formation where transport vessels carried civilian evacuees from Prime. The squadron assigned to that sector had been overwhelmed, and the nearest heavy ships were too far away to provide support in time. "Human destroyer Indomitable, you are closest to the breakthrough," Warsinger X transmitted. "Maintain defensive position and delay enemy advance until reinforcements arrive." Captain's response crackled through the communications array. "Negative, Command. We're moving to intercept." Watched his tactical displays with growing confusion as the human destroyer, barely 2/3 the size of a standard cruiser, accelerated directly toward the approaching Devourer fighters. The enemy formation consisted of 12 biomechanical entities, each one roughly equivalent to a coalition fighter, but with superior armor and regenerative capabilities. "Those humans are going to get themselves killed," muttered Navigation Singer Ra from her station nearby. 12 against 1, and they're charging in alone." The Indomitable opened fire while still at extreme range, its kinetic weapons sending streams of metal projectiles through space. Several Devourer fighters jerked aside, their biological components registering damage that should have been impossible to inflict at that distance. But the aliens continued their advance, rapidly closing the distance. What happened next would replay in memory for the rest of his life. Instead of maintaining distance and fighting defensively as any rational commander would, the human destroyer accelerated harder, driving directly into the center of the Devourer formation. Point defense systems that should have been reserved for incoming missiles suddenly shifted targets, tracking individual fighters with devastating precision. The ship's main guns, designed for engaging other capital vessels, began firing in rapid sequence rather than charging for maximum power shots. The first Devourer fighter exploded as concentrated kinetic fire overwhelmed its regenerative capabilities. The second lost half its biomechanical structure to a direct hit from the destroyer's main cannon. But instead of falling back, the remaining enemies swarmed the human vessel like predators sensing wounded prey. That was when learned that human weapons were not the most dangerous thing about human warfare. All stations, combat maneuvering, pattern Delta 7, Captain's voice rang through the communications link, still maintaining that impossibly calm tone. The Indomitable suddenly pivoted on its axis with an agility that everything knew about capital ship design. Main engines fired in coordinated bursts, sending the destroyer tumbling through 3 dimensions while somehow maintaining weapons lock on multiple targets. The Devourer fighters, evolved for pursuing fleeing prey, found themselves unable to predict the human ship's movement patterns. One moment the Indomitable was climbing above the engagement plane, the next it was diving beneath, while rotating to bring fresh weapons to bear. Its point defense systems never stopped firing, creating a sphere of destruction around the vessel that no enemy could penetrate. "Impossible," breathed Warsinger X from the command channel. "That level of coordination requires perfect neural interface between pilot and ship systems. How are they managing such precision with biological reflexes?" The answer came as monitored internal communications aboard the human destroyer. Instead of a single pilot making all maneuvering decisions, he heard multiple voices calling out target assignments, course corrections, and weapons coordination. The humans weren't relying on superior technology. They were functioning as a collective intelligence, with each crew member contributing their expertise to a unified tactical response. Target bearing 27 Mark 15, distance closing to optimal range. Maneuvering thruster burst in 3, 2, 1 Mark. Point defense tracking the wounded one on the starboard approach. Main gun cycling to next target, stand by for recoil compensation. The communication flowed like a perfectly orchestrated symphony, each human contributing their part while maintaining awareness of the whole. It was unlike anything in its experience. Most species either relied on individual excellence or hierarchical command structures. These humans seemed to have created something entirely new. The last Devourer fighter died in a cascade of kinetic impacts as the Indomitable completed a spiraling attack run that somehow left it positioned between the enemy breakthrough point and the civilian transports. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 minutes, and a single human destroyer had eliminated 12 enemy fighters without taking significant damage. Across the fleet communications network, silence reigned for several long seconds. "Indomitable report status," Warsinger X finally transmitted. "All systems operational, minor damage to forward armor plating," Captain responded. "Ready to rejoin formation or pursue additional targets as directed." Stared at his tactical displays, trying to process what he had witnessed. The humans had just accomplished something that should have been impossible according to every tactical doctrine in the Coalition database. They had taken a smaller, less advanced vessel against superior numbers and emerged victorious through nothing but pure coordination and tactical flexibility. "How," he found himself transmitting on the general communications channel. "How did you coordinate those maneuvers? Your reaction time, your weapon accuracy, it shouldn't be possible for biological entities." Captain's response carried what the translator indicated was amusement. "We train together, fight together, trust each other. Every human on this ship has spent years learning to work as part of the crew. When the shooting starts, we don't think of ourselves as individuals, we become part of something larger." The main battle continued for another 2 hours, but found his attention constantly drifting to the human contingent. Time and again, human vessels accomplished objectives that seemed beyond their capabilities. They moved like dancers through space, coordinated their actions with a precision that made veteran coalition forces look clumsy by comparison, and demonstrated a tactical creativity that kept surprising both allies and enemies. When a Devourer harvester broke through the main battle line and threatened to reach the colony's orbital stations, it was a human heavy cruiser, the Enterprise, that intercepted it. Captain Martinez and his crew engaged the kilometer-long enemy vessel in single combat, using hit-and-run tactics that slowly wore down the harvester's regenerative capabilities until coalition reinforcements could arrive to finish it off. When Devourer biofighters adapted to standard coalition point defense patterns, it was human tactical analysis that identified the adaptation and developed new countermeasures within minutes rather than the days or weeks such innovations typically required. When communications between coalition forces became disrupted by enemy jamming, human operators somehow maintained coordination through backup methods that other species hadn't even considered implementing. By the battle's end, the Devourer force had been completely destroyed with unusually light coalition casualties. The post-battle analysis would show that human forces had been responsible for eliminating nearly 40% of enemy combatants despite representing less than 15% of the coalition fleet's strength. As the combined forces began organizing search and rescue operations, found himself requesting permission to visit the human vessels. His curiosity about these remarkable allies had grown beyond mere professional interest. He needed to understand how they had achieved such effectiveness. The Indomitable's docking bay was surprisingly cramped compared to ship design, but scrupulously organized. Human crew members moved with efficient purpose, conducting post-battle maintenance and repairs with the same coordinated precision they had demonstrated in combat. What struck most forcefully was how they interacted with each other: constant communication, shared responsibilities, and an obvious mutual trust that permeated every aspect of their operations. Captain met him at the airlock, still wearing her battle-scarred uniform. "Welcome aboard, Communications Singer. I understand you have questions about human tactics." "I have questions about human nature," replied honestly. "Your species accomplishes things that should be impossible given your individual limitations. How?" Led him through the ship's corridors, pointing out various crew members at their duties. "Tell me," she said, "how do typically organize for combat?" "Each individual contributes according to their specialized capabilities," explained. "Superior warriors fight, superior engineers maintain systems, superior tacticians make command decisions. Everyone performs their role to the best of their ability." "And it works well," acknowledged. "Your people are renowned throughout the galaxy for their competence, but humans develop differently. We're not the strongest, fastest, or species individually. We survived by learning to function as groups, families, tribes, nations, and eventually our entire species working together." They paused at the ship's command center, where crew members were analyzing battle data and preparing reports. Noticed that the tactical displays showed not just their own ship's performance, but detailed information about every other human vessel in the engagement. "We don't just train individual skills," continued. "We train collective capabilities. Every human learns to be part of something larger than themselves. In combat, a human crew doesn't fight as individuals who happen to be on the same ship. We fight as a single organism with multiple specialized organs." "But how do you coordinate so effectively? Your communication patterns seem impossible to achieve without telepathic abilities." Smiled, an expression that the translator indicated conveyed warmth and humor. "We've had thousands of years to develop our coordination techniques. What you witness today represents millions of hours of training, not just by this crew, but by countless generations of humans who passed down their knowledge of working together." Spent the next several hours touring human vessels and observing their operations. What he discovered challenged every assumption he had held about warfare, technology, and the nature of intelligence itself. Humans didn't rely on superior equipment or individual excellence. They had created systems that their collective effectiveness beyond what any other species had achieved. Their weapons were precisely calibrated not for maximum individual power, but for optimal coordination between multiple platforms. Their ship designs prioritized crew efficiency and communication over raw capability. Their tactical doctrines emphasized adaptability and mutual support rather than the hierarchical command structures favored by most other species. Most remarkably, their training didn't focus primarily on individual skills, but on building trust and understanding between crew members. Humans spent years learning to anticipate each other's actions, to compensate for each other's weaknesses, and to amplify each other's strengths. As prepared to return to his own vessel, Captain offered a final observation. "You asked about human nature, communications singer. Here's what I think you should understand. Humans aren't remarkable because of what we can do individually. We're remarkable because of what we can become together." He carried those words with him as the Coalition fleet departed the system. What he had witnessed that day would reshape his understanding of warfare, cooperation, and the true meaning of strength. The humans had not simply fought alongside the Coalition forces. They had demonstrated an entirely new paradigm of what was possible when individuals chose to become part of something greater than themselves. "I fought alongside humans that day, and saw legends come to life." 3 months after the engagement, found himself assigned to a joint task force with a very different mission. The Devourers had begun targeting Coalition research facilities, apparently seeking to capture rather than simply destroy certain types of technology. Intelligence suggested they were specifically hunting for weapons research that could be adapted to their biomechanical systems. The mission seemed straightforward: evacuate the scientists from Research Station Omega-7 before Devourer forces could reach it. The station orbited a gas giant in an isolated system, far from any major Coalition strongholds. Its only defenses were automated systems designed to deter pirates, not military-grade assault forces. Had specifically requested assignment to a unit that included human forces. His report on their tactical capabilities had generated considerable interest among Coalition command, and several species wanted to study human coordination techniques firsthand. He found himself serving as a liaison officer aboard the human heavy cruiser Defiance, working directly with Captain and her crew. The initial phase proceeded exactly as planned. Coalition vessels arrived at Omega-7 12 hours before the estimated Devourer arrival time, providing adequate margin for civilian evacuation. Transport ships began ferrying research personnel to safety, while military vessels established defensive perimeters around the station. Then the tactical situation changed dramatically. "Contact bearing 047 Mark 12, announced Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. "Single vessel, configuration unknown, approaching from the outer system." Captain studied the tactical display with characteristic human intensity. Size and capabilities. Approximately 2 kilometers in length, energy signatures unlike any known Devourer design. It's not broadcasting any identification signals. Watch the command crew coordinate their response with the same fluid efficiency he had observed during the battle. Information flowed seamlessly between stations, while Captain maintained awareness of every detail without micromanaging individual crew members. Communications, any response to standard hailing frequencies. Negative, Captain. The vessel appears to be maintaining communications silence. Tactical assessment, assume hostile intent. Single contact should not represent significant threat to current force composition, came the immediate response. However, unknown capabilities require caution. The unknown vessel continued its approach for another 30 minutes before its true nature became apparent. As it drew closer, sensors revealed details that chilled every experienced warrior in the task force. The ship wasn't just unknown, it was wrong in ways that rational explanation. "Captain," Torres called out, his voice tight with professional control, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from that vessel. Power generation levels are off the scale, and I'm detecting weapons systems that don't match anything in our databases." Elaboration. "The energy patterns suggest this ship could destroy our entire task force without significant effort. Whatever that thing is, it's operating on a completely different technological level than anything we've encountered." Felt his crystalline structure resonate with frequencies of deep unease. In all his cycles of military service, he had never encountered a situation where Coalition forces were so completely outmatched. Even the Devourers used variants of technology that could be analyzed and countered. This vessel represented something entirely outside known parameters. The mystery deepened when long-range sensors detected the Devourer force approaching from a different vector. Instead of the expected assault fleet, the enemy had dispatched what appeared to be their most advanced units. ships that normally served as command vessels rather than frontline attackers. The implication was obvious. Whatever research was being conducted at Omega-7, both sides considered it critically important. Tactical update, Captain announced to the assembled task force commanders. We now have two unknown factors approaching our position. Priority 1 remains civilian evacuation, but we need to prepare for engagement against superior forces. Warsinger X, commanding the contingent, transmitted his assessment. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Our forces are insufficient to engage either threat effectively, let alone both simultaneously. The recommendation was tactically sound. Coalition doctrine clearly stated that forces should avoid engagement when facing overwhelming odds unless strategic objectives required sacrifice. Research Station, Omega-7, while valuable, did not qualify as a strategic objective worth the loss of an entire task force. Captain's response surprised everyone. Negative. We have 1,800 civilian researchers still aboard that station. Evacuation requires another 4 hours minimum. We hold position and buy them time. Captain, transmitted the squadron leader, even human tactical excellence has limitations. You cannot overcome pure technological superiority through coordination alone. Expected Captain to acknowledge this reality and order a fighting withdrawal that might save some of the task force while abandoning the civilians. Instead, he watched her initiate a series of communications that demonstrated just how different human strategic thinking could be. All human vessels, this is Defiance. Initiate Prometheus Protocol. Authorization 77 Alpha. The response from human ships throughout the task force was immediate and uniform. Prometheus Protocol confirmed. Standing by for implementation. Coalition allies, Captain continued, recommend you maintain current positions and focus on civilian evacuation. Human forces will engage both incoming threats. The communications channel erupted with protests from coalition commanders. The idea that human vessels, representing perhaps 20% of the total force, could engage two superior enemy fleets simultaneously seemed like elaborate suicide. Found himself transmitting directly to Captain. Captain, I do not understand. What is Prometheus Protocol? How can your forces hope to succeed against such overwhelming odds? Captain's response carried that peculiar combination of calm confidence and grim determination that seemed characteristic of human military commanders. Communications Singer, you asked me once about human nature. Today you're going to see another aspect of what makes us human. The unknown vessel reached weapons range first. Its opening salvo demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded coalition understanding by orders of magnitude. Energy beams that should have been impossible to generate carved through space with perfect accuracy, while defensive systems that seemed to violate known physics deflected return fire without apparent effort. Any rational military force would have immediately withdrawn from such an engagement. The technological disparity was so extreme that continued combat represented pointless sacrifice rather than tactical necessity. The human response rationality entirely. Instead of fighting the mysterious vessel directly, human forces implemented what they called disruption patterns, tactical maneuvers designed not to destroy the enemy, but to interfere with its operations in ways that slowly degraded its effectiveness. The Defiance and its escorts began executing seemingly random attack runs that forced the enemy to adjust its positioning and weapon targeting continuously. They're not trying to win, realized, speaking his thoughts aloud as he monitored the engagement. They're trying to confuse it. Exactly, confirmed Lieutenant Torres from his position at the tactical station. Prometheus Protocol assumes we can't match superior technology directly. Instead, we make the enemy fight our kind of battle rather than their kind. The human vessels moved through space like a coordinated dance, never presenting stable targets while maintaining constant pressure on the enemy ship. Their weapons caused minimal damage, but forced continuous defensive responses that prevented the alien vessel from utilizing its technological advantages effectively. Meanwhile, the second wave of human ships positioned themselves to intercept the approaching Devourer force. Captain aboard the heavy cruiser, Indomitable, the same vessel that had distinguished itself at Coordinated, what appeared to be an even more hopeless engagement. The Devourer command ships possessed regenerative capabilities, adaptive weapon systems, and combat experience gained from consuming dozens of civilizations. They had been specifically selected for this mission because standard coalition tactics had proven inadequate against their advanced biomechanical systems. The human response demonstrated why their species had earned such rapid respect within coalition ranks. "All ships implement pattern Omega," Captain transmitted. "Target priority is disruption of enemy coordination, not individual vessel destruction." The human destroyers spread into a formation that seemed to maximize their vulnerability while minimizing their offensive potential. Then they began attacking in a manner that made no tactical sense according to any doctrine had studied. Instead of concentrating fire on individual targets until they were destroyed, human weapons targeted specific systems across multiple enemy vessels simultaneously. Instead of maintaining defensive formations, human ships deliberately exposed themselves to enemy fire while coordinating their movements to create what appeared to be chaos. The effect on the Devourer forces was immediate and devastating. The biomechanical entities had evolved to function as a collective intelligence, with individual ships serving as specialized organs within a larger organism. Human attacks disrupted the communication pathways between vessels, forcing each ship to function independently rather than as part of a coordinated whole. "They're using the enemy's strengths against them," observed with growing amazement. "The Devourer's collective intelligence becomes a weakness when the connections between units are disrupted." "Human tactical doctrine," Lieutenant Torres explained while continuing to coordinate the Defiant's attacks against the mysterious vessel, "emphasizes adaptability above all else. We don't just plan for known enemies, we develop techniques that can be modified to exploit whatever weaknesses we discover during actual combat." The engagement continued for another 2 hours, with human forces somehow maintaining the initiative against both superior enemy fleets. The mysterious vessel found itself unable to utilize its devastating weapons effectively because human ships never remained in predictable locations long enough to target. The Devourer force gradually lost cohesion as their collective intelligence networks suffered continuous disruption. Most remarkably, the humans began adapting their tactics in real time as they learned more about their enemy's capabilities. When the mysterious vessel demonstrated the ability to predict human movement patterns, the Defiance and its escorts immediately shifted to what they called randomized evasion protocols maneuvers that appeared to be generated by pure chance rather than tactical planning. When the Devourer ships began compensating for communication disruptions by developing redundant network pathways, human forces identified the new connection points and targeted them with precisely coordinated strikes that required split-second timing between multiple vessels. "How?" finally asked Captain during a brief lull in the action. "How are your ships coordinating such complex maneuvers while maintaining defensive operations against 2 separate enemy fleets?" Captain gestured toward the command center's main display, which showed tactical information not just for their own ship, but for every human vessel in the engagement. "We're not fighting 2 separate battles," she explained. "We're fighting one battle with 2 different enemy components. Every human ship is contributing to both engagements simultaneously." The display showed what she meant. While the Defiance focused primarily on the mysterious vessel, its sensors continuously fed targeting data to ships engaging the Devourer force. Meanwhile, destroyers fighting the biomechanical entities provided early warning information about attack patterns that helped predict the alien vessel's tactical decisions. "We call it distributed consciousness," Lieutenant Torres added. "Individual human ships maintain their specialized roles, but they're all part of a larger tactical intelligence that encompasses our entire force." Was still processing this concept when the engagement reached its climax. The mysterious vessel, apparently recognizing that its technological advantages were being negated by human tactics, began charging what appeared to be a planet-killing weapon. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the Coalition's sensors could accurately measure. Simultaneously, the Devourer forces launched a coordinated assault that should have overwhelmed the human destroyers through pure mass, if nothing else. Dozens of biomechanical fighters swarmed toward human positions, while the command ships provided covering fire. Any other species would have faced the choice between preventing one catastrophic attack or the other. The humans chose both. All ships implement final protocol, Captain transmitted. Time to completion, 4 minutes 30 seconds. What followed would become known in coalition military histories as the Omega-7 maneuver, a tactical evolution that redefined understanding of what was possible in space combat. Every human vessel simultaneously shifted from defensive operations to pure offense. Instead of trying to protect themselves from enemy fire, they coordinated their movements to maximize damage to both enemy fleets while accepting whatever casualties this strategy required. The Defiance led a direct assault on the mysterious vessel's weapon systems, accepting massive damage to its hull while delivering precisely targeted strikes that disrupted the charging sequence of the planet-killer weapon. Meanwhile, the destroyers engaging the Devourer force abandoned all defensive protocols and concentrated their entire offensive capability on the enemy command ship's central coordination nodes. The cost was devastating. 3 human destroyers suffered critical damage, and the Defiance lost half its weapon systems to enemy counterattacks. But the tactical objective succeeded completely. The mysterious vessel's planet-killer weapon failed to discharge, instead creating a massive energy feedback that crippled the alien ship's primary systems. The Devourer command network collapsed entirely as their central coordination points were destroyed, leaving individual ships helpless without collective guidance. All coalition forces, Captain transmitted, her voice remarkably steady despite the massive damage her ship had sustained. Enemy fleets are neutralized. Resume evacuation operations immediately. The aftermath of the engagement left every non-human observer struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. Human forces had not simply defeated 2 technologically superior enemy fleets. They had done so while accepting casualties that would have broken the morale of most other species. Yet as observed the human crews conducting damage control and casualty recovery, he saw no signs of the despair or psychological trauma that typically followed such costly victories. Instead, human personnel moved with the same coordinated efficiency they had demonstrated during combat, treating their wounded, repairing their ships, and preparing to continue operations if necessary. "How do you maintain such discipline after suffering such losses?" asked Captain as medical teams worked to stabilize her injured crew members. "We don't see them as losses," she replied, watching human and coalition medical personnel work together to save lives. "We see them as investments in something larger than ourselves. Those crew members who died today ensured that 1,800 civilian researchers will live to continue their work. That's not a loss, that's victory." The evacuation of Research Station Omega-7 completed successfully 6 hours later. The final transport ships departed just as long-range sensors detected additional Devourer forces approaching the system, forces that would have easily overwhelmed the original Coalition task force. As the combined fleet departed the system, found himself reviewing tactical recordings of the engagement. The more he studied human coordination during the battle, the more he realized that what he had witnessed represented something unprecedented in galactic military history. Other species had developed superior technology, more powerful weapons, and more resilient soldiers. But humans had created something entirely different, a form of collective intelligence that individual capabilities beyond what should have been mathematically possible. "Captain," he transmitted as the human forces conducted post-battle analysis, "I believe I am beginning to understand what makes your species remarkable. You do not simply fight as individuals who cooperate, you become something greater than the sum of your parts." "Now you're starting to understand," she replied. "Humans learned long ago that our individual limitations become irrelevant when we choose to function as part of something larger. What you witnessed today wasn't just human tactical coordination, it was human nature expressing itself through warfare." The implications of this realization would reshape coalition military doctrine for generations to come. But the lesson was more personal. He had witnessed a species that had transcended the normal limitations of individual consciousness, creating a form of collective intelligence that remained fundamentally different from the hive minds or cybernetic networks developed by other races. Humans had not abandoned their individuality to become more than themselves. They had learned to express their individuality through participation in something greater. It was a distinction that made all the difference, and one that would prove crucial in the challenges yet to come. "I fought alongside humans that day, and saw legends come to life. The final test of human capabilities came 6 months later, during what would become known as the Battle of the Last Stand. Devourer forces had bypassed coalition defensive lines and struck directly at the heart of galactic civilization, the Ancient of Sanctuary, where the oldest and most advanced species had established their combined capital. Sanctuary represented 20,000 years of accumulated knowledge, housing the greatest libraries, research facilities, and cultural treasures of dozens of civilizations. Its destruction would not simply eliminate a strategic target, but would erase the collective memory of galactic civilization itself. The defense of Sanctuary should have been overwhelming. Every major species had contributed their most advanced vessels and most experienced commanders to protect the assembled fleet included crystal ships that could channel stellar energy, dreadnoughts with armor forged in neutron star cores, and fighters capable of moving faster than light within normal space. Yet Devourer intelligence had proven superior to coalition estimates. The enemy fleet that emerged from hyperspace around Sanctuary was not merely large, it was impossibly vast, representing the combined might of every force the Devourers had assembled during their 3-year campaign of galactic conquest. Served aboard the Coalition Command ship Eternal Harmony, coordinating communications between the various species forces as they prepared for what every tactical analysis indicated would be a hopeless battle. The Devourer fleet outnumbered Coalition forces by approximately 8-1, possessed superior regenerative capabilities, and included several vessel types that had never been encountered before. "All defensive positions report ready," transmitted Warsinger X from his command dreadnought. "Coalition fleet stands prepared to defend Sanctuary to the last ship." The words carried the weight of inevitability. Every commander understood that they were not fighting to win, but to delay the Devourers long enough for emergency evacuations to preserve some fragment of galactic civilization's accumulated knowledge. Then Admiral Sarah transmitted from the human command vessel Enterprise. "Coalition Command, request permission to implement protocol." The communications channel fell silent for several long seconds. Had never heard of protocol, and from the lack of immediate response, neither had any other non-human commander. "Admiral," finally came the reply from High Command. "No such protocol exists in joint tactical databases. Please clarify." "Protocol is a human-developed strategy for engagement against impossible odds," Admiral explained. "Implementation requires complete operational authority over all coalition forces for the duration of the engagement." The request was unprecedented. No single species had ever requested command authority over the entire coalition fleet, and certainly not during the most crucial battle in galactic history. "Admiral," transmitted Fleet Singer from the flagship, "human forces represent less than 12% of total fleet strength. What strategic advantage could justify unified command under human authority?" Admiral's response would be analyzed by military historians for generations. "Fleet Singer, you have observed human tactical capabilities in individual engagements. Protocol represents the application of human coordination principles to an entire fleet structure. We cannot guarantee victory, but we can guarantee a battle unlike anything the Devourers have encountered." The debate that followed lasted precious minutes while Devourer forces continued their approach. Coalition commanders struggled with the decision to place their entire civilization's defense under the authority of a species that had achieved less than 2 years earlier. Found himself transmitting directly to High Command. "Honored Fleet Singers, I have observed human tactical methods in 2 previous engagements. They accomplish objectives that appear impossible through the application of coordination principles beyond our current understanding. If human command believes they can improve our chances, we should consider their proposal seriously." The final decision came from an unexpected source. Ancient Fleet Singer, representing the ancients who had constructed Sanctuary itself, transmitted from the deepest levels of the "Grant Admiral Operational Authority. We have observed the galactic community for 20. The humans represent something new, and this crisis requires solutions beyond conventional wisdom." Admiral's first order as unified commander surprised everyone. "All coalition forces, implement dispersal formation Omega 9. Abandon defensive positions around Sanctuary and spread throughout the system." The command directly contradicted every principle of defensive warfare. Protecting a fixed position required concentrated firepower and overlapping defensive fields. Dispersing forces would make it impossible to prevent Devourer access to the Admiral, protested Warsinger X. Dispersal formation will leave Sanctuary defenseless against direct assault. Negative, Admiral replied. Dispersal formation will allow us to implement tactical mobility on a scale the Devourers cannot counter. Trust the process, Warsinger. We're going to win this battle by making it impossible for the enemy to fight their kind of fight. What followed redefined everything thought he understood about space warfare. Instead of meeting the Devourer fleet in traditional battle lines, coalition forces under human command began what appeared to be a chaotic retreat. Ships scattered throughout the system, abandoning their defensive positions and fleeing in seemingly random directions. The Devourer response was immediate and predictable. Their forces accelerated toward Sanctuary, apparently recognizing that the coalition defense had collapsed before battle was even joined. Biomechanical vessels moved in perfect coordination, their collective intelligence anticipating swift victory against scattered and demoralized enemies. They had never encountered human tactical thinking on such a scale. Phase 1 complete, Admiral announced. All ships implement Alpha, targeting solutions are being distributed now. Suddenly, every coalition vessel received detailed tactical information about specific enemy targets, not just general positioning data, but precise attack vectors, optimal weapons configurations, and coordinated timing sequences that required split-second precision across the entire fleet. Watched his tactical displays with growing amazement as hundreds of coalition ships began moving toward predetermined positions with perfect synchronization. The dispersal that had seemed like chaotic retreat revealed itself as a massive coordinated maneuver that positioned coalition forces in optimal attack formations throughout the system. Impossible, breathed Navigation Singer Ra from her station. The computational requirements for coordinating this many vessels simultaneously exceed our entire fleet's processing capabilities. It's not being calculated by computers, realized, monitoring the communications traffic between human command ships. They're using distributed human intelligence to process tactical information faster than any computer system. The first wave of coordinated attacks demonstrated the effectiveness of human fleet coordination principles. Instead of hundreds of individual ships fighting separate engagements, coalition forces functioned as a single tactical entity with hundreds of specialized components. Energy weapons fired in precisely timed sequences that created cascading resonance effects, multiplying their destructive potential far beyond normal parameters. Dreadnoughts coordinated their positions to create overlapping fields of fire that trapped Devourer formations in devastating crossfires. Fighters moved in patterns so complex that enemy targeting systems couldn't predict their movements, while maintaining perfect coordination with larger vessels. The Devourer fleet, evolved for overwhelming opponents through superior numbers and individual vessel capabilities, found itself unable to utilize its advantages effectively. Their collective intelligence could process information about individual coalition ships, but struggled to predict the actions of an entire fleet functioning as a unified entity. Phase 2 initiation, Admiral announced. All ships implement dynamic repositioning. Target priorities are being updated continuously. The coalition fleet began what could only be described as a three-dimensional dance performed by hundreds of vessels across an entire star system. Ships moved through space in patterns that seemed to defy tactical logic, yet somehow maintained perfect coordination and mutual support. Devourer forces found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Coalition vessels would appear from unexpected vectors, deliver devastating attacks against specific targets, then vanish into new formations before enemy counterattacks could be coordinated. How are they predicting our movements so accurately? Found himself wondering aloud as he watched Devourer formations repeatedly fail to engage coalition forces effectively. They're not predicting, Lieutenant Torres explained from the human tactical station where he had been assigned as liaison. They're influencing. Every coalition movement is designed to force specific Devourer responses, which are then countered by pre-planned maneuvers. The concept was staggering in its implications. Human fleet tactics didn't simply react to enemy actions, they shaped enemy behavior to create advantageous situations. The Devourers weren't fighting against coalition forces. They were fighting against their own predictable responses to human tactical manipulation. The battle's turning point came when Admiral initiated what she called Omega, a maneuver that seemed to violate every principle of space warfare. All coalition forces implement Convergence Pattern 7, target priority, enemy command nexus. Time to execution, 12 minutes. The order required every coalition vessel to abandon their current engagements and converge on the center of the Devourer fleet, where their largest command ships maintained coordination for the entire enemy force. The maneuver would expose coalition forces to devastating concentrated fire while abandoning all tactical advantages they had gained through dispersal and mobility. Admiral, transmitted Warsinger X, convergence on enemy command nexus will result in catastrophic casualties. Coalition forces cannot survive sustained engagement against concentrated enemy firepower. Correct, Admiral replied. We can't survive it, but the Devourers can't survive what we're about to do to them. The Coalition fleet's convergence movement created what appeared to be a massive tactical error. Hundreds of ships abandoned their advantageous positions and flew directly toward the strongest concentration of enemy forces. Devourer command ships immediately recognized the opportunity and began coordinating their entire fleet to destroy the approaching coalition vessels. That was when human tactical planning revealed its true sophistication. The convergence pattern wasn't designed to engage enemy command ships directly. Instead, it forced every Devourer vessel in the system to adjust their positions and target priorities simultaneously. For several crucial minutes, the entire enemy fleet focused on intercepting coalition forces approaching their command nexus. During those minutes, coalition ships that had remained hidden throughout the system, vessels whose positions had been concealed by the earlier dispersal maneuvers, emerged from concealment and attacked undefended Devourer support units. The enemy fleet discovered that while their attention was focused on the obvious threat, human planning had positioned coalition forces to destroy their supply vessels, repair facilities, and communication relays. The Devourers found themselves winning a tactical engagement while losing their strategic capability to continue fighting. All ships implement final, Admiral transmitted as coalition forces completed their convergence on the enemy command nexus. Prepare for close-range engagement. What followed would be remembered as the most devastating close-quarters battle in galactic history. Coalition vessels dove directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet, accepting massive casualties while delivering point-blank attacks against enemy command ships. The exchange was brutal beyond description. Ships from both fleets died in explosions that lit up the system like newborn stars. The Devourers' technological and numerical advantages meant that coalition casualties mounted rapidly, with entire squadrons disappearing under concentrated enemy fire. Yet the human tactical plan achieved its objective. Devourer command ships, evolved for coordinating fleet actions rather than direct combat, could not withstand sustained close-range attacks from dedicated warships. One by one, their command nexus vessels suffered critical damage that severed their connections to the greater collective intelligence. Enemy fleet coordination degrading, reported tactical stations throughout the coalition fleet. Devourer forces losing collective cohesion. Without their collective intelligence network, individual Devourer ships reverted to basic survival instincts rather than coordinated tactical behavior. The massive fleet that had threatened to overwhelm Sanctuary through superior numbers and coordination became a collection of confused, isolated vessels fighting for individual survival. The final phase of the battle lasted 6 hours as coalition forces, still under unified human command, systematically engaged isolated Devourer vessels. Without their collective coordination, enemy ships proved vulnerable to the same tactical principles that had made coalition forces so effective: concentrated attacks, coordinated maneuvers, and adaptive targeting. When the last Devourer vessel finally fell silent, the aftermath revealed the true cost of victory. Nearly 40% of coalition forces had been destroyed or critically damaged during the engagement. Thousands of crew members from dozens of species had given their lives to protect Sanctuary and preserve galactic civilization. Yet the strategic victory was complete. The Devourer fleet that had represented their greatest concentration of military power had been entirely destroyed. More importantly, the collective intelligence networks that coordinated their galaxy-wide operations had been severed, leaving isolated Devourer forces throughout the galaxy unable to coordinate their activities. As rescue operations began and the surviving coalition forces regrouped around Sanctuary, found himself struggling to process what he had witnessed. Human command had not simply won an impossible battle. They had fundamentally changed the nature of fleet warfare itself. "Admiral," he transmitted as the Enterprise coordinated post-battle operations, "I believe I finally understand what makes humans unique among galactic species. You do not simply use cooperation as a tactical tool. You have evolved cooperation into a form of intelligence that exceeds what any individual could achieve." Admiral's response carried deep satisfaction. "Communications singer, what you witnessed today was humanity expressing its true nature through warfare. We are not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. But when we choose to work together, we become something greater than any individual limitation." The defense of Sanctuary marked the end of the Devourer threat to galactic civilization. Isolated enemy forces throughout the galaxy, deprived of their collective intelligence networks, proved vulnerable to conventional coalition tactics. Within 6 months, the ancient enemy that had consumed entire star systems was reduced to scattered remnants hiding in the dark spaces between stars. But for the countless other beings who had witnessed human tactical capabilities firsthand, the real revelation was not about warfare at all. Humans had demonstrated that cooperation was not simply a tool for survival, but a pathway to transcendence, a means by which individual consciousness could become part of something infinitely greater while retaining its essential nature. In the years that followed, human coordination principles would be studied and adapted by species throughout the galaxy. Yet none would achieve the same level of integrated effectiveness, because none had evolved the fundamental trust and collective identity that made human cooperation possible. He would conclude his official report on human tactical capabilities with a simple statement that became famous throughout Coalition space. "I fought alongside humans that day and saw legends come to life. What they accomplished was not the result of superior technology or individual ability, but of something far more remarkable, the willingness to become part of something greater than themselves, while remaining fundamentally who they are." The human response to this assessment was characteristically modest. When asked about their species' remarkable achievements during the Devourer War, Admiral spoke for all humanity. "We didn't do anything extraordinary. We simply did what humans have always done. We took care of each other, worked together, and refused to give up when others needed our help. That's not remarkable. That's just human." Perhaps that humility, more than any tactical brilliance or technological innovation, was the true measure of what made humans unique among the stars. They had achieved greatness not by transcending their nature, but by expressing it fully in service of something larger than themselves.